Okay, as promised, it is 1:02 on the dot. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning to our friends on the West Coast. Thank you for joining us for an overview of the Paycheck Protection Program. We put this together because we were hearing that there was a lot of confusion with our partners and certainly from our end on the PPP loan. And while we certainly aren't experts on that and we have no official guidance, we have been able to successfully apply for both rounds. So we wanted to share our process with you and some tips and tricks from what we learned from that process. So to facilitate this, we asked our accounting manager, who always works magic for us, Richard Stanley, to join us. Richard is an accounting manager with over 20 years of experience, and currently he is at InSource. He advises clients, specifically us, on financial planning and analysis, and he really is good at forecasting and staffing models and negotiations. And he really uses his expertise to just guide companies, and again, including NCVCs. And he has guided us quite adeptly through this PPP process. I'd like to give a very brief caveat to the discussion today, and that's that this is for informal guidance purposes only. It should not be taken as legal or accounting advice. Again, we've just successfully been able to apply for both rounds, and we've gone through this process. So we really wanted to share what we learned. And while we're going to do our best to answer your questions regarding our experience specifically, a lot of the questions that have already come in, and many you may ask today, may be best left to an accountant directly, and we'll try to flag those. But we would encourage you to seek the advice of an accountant as well. Again, this is just us sharing what we've gone through and some pitfalls and some victories. As always, with these NCVC webinars, we're going to go ahead and leave the chat open to everyone to talk amongst yourselves. Please make sure if you're trying to chat with everyone, you'll have a and you have a drop-down button that says all panelists and attendees, or all panelists and attendees, or just all panelists. If you want to talk to all attendees, just make sure you have the all attendees button clicked. For any questions that you have, we are only going to be monitoring the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of your screen. So please go ahead and ask any questions in that Q&A box. Otherwise, I might not see them, and I'm going to be the one that calls them out. So at the end of this call, if there were any questions that we can't answer that we didn't flag, we will try to dig out some answers for you and email them to all of the registrants. And with all of that, I'm going to turn this over to Richard Stanley with a big thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. So just a couple of quick comments up front before we get into the details of the conversation. We're going to be going over an application, a specific application for the second round draw. If you have previously received the first round, you are eligible to do the second round draw. That doesn't mean that you can't still get in on the PPP program, but you'll need to apply using the first draw application. That's going to be at the very end of this presentation. It's actually a little bit simpler than the second draw that we're going to go over. So if you hang in there with what we're talking about on the second draw, you should be able to pick up the first draw just as easily. And just a couple of other footnotes. It is on a first come, first served basis, and the applications are open until March 31st. So you just want to keep that in mind when you're putting together the application and the documentation that you need to support the application. The last note that I want to really drive home before we start looking at the details. I had 4 very important contacts when trying to apply for and get these loans. First is obviously your bank lender. So whoever you have contacts with at the bank, you should get in contact with them first and foremost, because they're going to have all the application information available to you. We relied not so much, but from time to time we talked to our CPA just to make sure we were, headed in the right direction and not doing anything that would be outside the rules, because we're certainly not experts unto ourselves, and the CPAs that have been learning this for quite a while, since the beginning. So they're very important to have on your side. The Small Business Association website is always helpful. Whenever I had questions that cropped up in the course of the process, I would just log in there, and there's a little banner at the top that said COVID options. I just clicked there, and usually the information that I was looking for was, it's very helpful. And then the last but not least is your payroll provider. We use ADP as our payroll service provider. They have developed a lot of reports for us in order for us to produce this application that we're about to go over. So if we could just go to the next screen, and we can kind of just jump in. And one more. What I was going to do, we might want to make the screen a little bit bigger. That's great. And then just slide up to the very top. The first quarter of the first page. So basically, we're going to run through this application start to finish and explain where the numbers are coming from. But the first quarter of the first page is really just information related to the company, what type of an organization you are, what year you were established, the name of your company, your address, the NAICS code, which I just took right off of my tax return. It should be on your tax return. And then your EIN number, just regular contact information that's pretty readily available to everybody. And then once you get below that section, this is really the meat of the discussion. If you look at where it says average monthly payroll, and then if you slide to the right, it says multiply that number times 2. We're going to go over that in a little bit of detail, but that's basically, if you wanted to break this down into one like little tiny nutshell, that is what we're going to be driving for to get as a loan from the SBA. And how we go about arriving at that number is what we're going to be talking about today. Some other pieces of information that are important. When you apply for it and you come up with this figure, which is $445,000 in this example, it's a fictitious company, but that's what they're going to be applying for to get as a loan. It has to be identified as to what you're going to be using that for. And for NCVC's case, we used it to cover our payroll costs, our rent, and the utilities. That's pretty much what they allow you to use it for. And they give you a certain period of time to use the money. And then at the end of it, you can go into a whole new forgiveness program. But we won't go over that today. We're just kind of focus on getting the money first. And then if we slide down just a little bit, so you can bring up where it says reduction in gross receipts. Yep. This is the piece that's an added requirement in the second round that they didn't have for the first round. And basically what they're saying here, and we'll go through the numbers shortly. What they're saying here is, in order to be eligible to apply for the second draw, a company needs to show that any one of the quarters in 2020, first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, you can pick the quarter that you want to represent. It has to be at least a 25% reduction in overall gross receipts from 2019. And in this example, if you see, again, this is a fictitious company, but in the third quarter of 2020, the gross receipts for this company was $667,000 compared to the same time last year, which was $1,131,000, which was well over the 25% reduction. So this company would qualify for the PPP loan application. But that's an important piece to know, because there are companies that we work with here at InSource that are eligible to apply for the first round, but then they were doing well, so they were excluded from applying for the second round. So that's a very important piece that you have to just make sure you calculate before you apply. And then just to kind of cruise down the first 2 pages of this application. They're just looking to find out who the responsible person is that's going to be, putting their name on the application. If there's a percentage of ownership, you have to identify it. You have to give your own personal tax ID number and your home address. And then they go into a litany of questions. And just they're very, let me put it to you this way. Most of the questions that they're asking for, at least for NCVC, they were basically no to every one of those questions, with the exception of number 6, is the United States the principal place of residence for all your employees? Other than that, all the other questions, you have to read through every question. I'm not going to read through every one for you and just be overly boring. But it's just basically information to make sure that you're, a company in good standing, I guess, is the best way to say it. And then if we want to slide down to the next page. Yep, let me just. The next page is that the person that's responsible for signing the application is just going to certify that, they understand the rules. They're going to use the money exactly for what it's eligible for, the payroll, the rent, utilities, and they're not going to do anything nefarious with the funds, basically, is what this is saying. It's really important to read through the whole application document. For one, just to kind of get an overview of and an understanding of what they're looking for. But 2, because you're putting your name to something, you just need to understand every question that they're asking. But it's basically just saying, I'm going to get the money, I'm going to use it to keep my people employed during a difficult time, is in a nutshell, what's going on there. So just read all the certifications before you sign off on the application. If you could slide down a little bit, Megan, right after it says read all certifications below. Then the next part is also certifications, but they're asking you to just put your initials next to those, just to say that you understand everything that they're asking of you, and that, you're going to be on the up and up on the loan. But I just, I don't want to go through each individual line, but you do have to put your little signature, not signature, but initials next to that. And then we can drop down to the next page. And then that's just some more certifications, obviously your signature, and then we can probably skip. I mean, pages 4 through 8 are just literally instructions that are really important to read through so that you get an idea of what you're trying to accomplish. Hopefully during the process of this discussion, when you read these instructions, they'll make a lot more sense, because the first time I read through this in trying to apply for the first PPP loan, sometimes the requests can be very nebulous and you can't really understand what they're asking for. But what I'm going to try to do is just show you the numbers that I got and where I got them from, and they will coincide with the instructions that when you read these, they'll make a little bit more sense. So you read through it, you collect the data, probably read through it again to make sure you got everything, and then you'll be ready to apply to the bank. So the next 4 pages, I'm not going to go over in any level of detail. We can just skip to probably, I think it's page 9, Megan, or maybe it's, I'm sorry, 7, page 7, I think. All right, that's what I want to do. Maybe just go back and see what the writing is on the previous page. Okay, yeah, thank you. So again, after you've filled out this information, you've collected it, they're going to ask you for the support that backs up the spreadsheets that we're going to go over in a minute. Some of those supporting documents are going to be your quarterly 941s that you could get directly from your payroll service provider. They're going to have those for you, and that you can just go and get them from them. So you don't have to worry about, oh, where do I go find that? If you have like ADP as your service provider, you can just call them up and say, hey, I need these quarterly returns for this time period, and they'll get them for you. Same thing with the payroll registers. ADP provided us with all the support that we needed on that. The documentation, because you're allowed to, you're allowed to cover your payroll costs and your fringe benefits, which include the health insurance expenses. So you will also need to get the statements for the time period that you're working on. Usually it's either 2020 or 2019. You'll just need to get your health insurance statements that you paid for during that time period and provide that for support, just so that they know that you actually paid these bills. And then just go to the next slide, please. It's interesting. I think each bank is a little different, but this next bullet point, there's a possibility that when you show them that, hey, I had a 35% reduction in my gross receipts in 2020 compared to 2019 during the third quarter. Some banks might ask you for bank statements or some other kind of support that will back up that particular, piece of information that you're giving them. Surprisingly, our bank did not ask us for that, but what we did do is we downloaded our income statement from our accounting software package for the 2 periods that we were representing, and provided them with that. And for Eagle Bank, that was fine with them. So it just varies depending on what bank you're going to be working with. And then the other piece, the other thing that you have to kind of learn as you go is when you talk with Eagle Bank or you talk with your bank, they're going to have a portal or a website that's specific to the PPP loan process that you will then upload the documentation that they're requesting in order for you to prove, that you're worthy of getting the loan. So, and then we already talked about the people that we want to kind of keep close to the vest when we're doing this process. Next slide, please. Okay. You might need to, explain that. So this is really the meat of the application. And I'm just gonna open mine up here. So on the first page that we reviewed, we were showing the average payroll cost per month. And then we multiplied that number by 2.5 times to come up with the total loan that we were going to ask for. This is the breakdown of that calculation. So we can just go through this slowly, but it's basically NCVC decided to use, not that these numbers are NCVC's, but the template that I used came from NCVC, and we happen to use 2019. None of the numbers represent any company that exists, but you can use the year 2020, whichever one is more advantageous to you. In NCVC's case, because we had more payroll expense in 2019 than 2020, we opted to go with that number because we could increase the amount of loan that we were able to get. And that's what I did with the company Z here. But again, this here is the document that's going to tell you how much of a loan you can go and ask for at the bank. And it's made up of five pieces, basically. All the salary and wages that you paid out across the year, the healthcare payments that you made. The only caveat to the healthcare benefits is that you have to reduce that cost that you paid the healthcare company by whatever contributions the employees made through payroll deduction, which you can also get from your payroll service provider. So that would be line 2. Line 3 is any kind of match you made on your, if you have a 401k plan. If the company contributed to the 401k plan, that can be deducted. Not deducted, that can be included in your calculation. Any state and local taxes that the company paid for can be added into the calculation. And then the piece that they reduce the request by is for any employee that is making greater than $100,000, they cap that employees or those employees' salaries at $100,000. So that little number down at the bottom there, negative $4,411, is just representative of Company Z had several employees that might have been making more than $100,000, and we just had to knock that down by that amount. But basically, ADP can provide you with every single one of these items exclusive of the health insurance invoices that you would just have to collect on your own and drop into that row. And can you see can we go over it so that we can see the last column? I can't see it. Okay, yeah. And then, yeah, I just put a little note next to next to the number what the source is. In our case, we use ADP as our payroll provider. So they provided us with all those the information in each of those rows. And then whoever your health insurance company is will give you the second line item. But basically, the grand total came out to $2,136,000. And if we just slide back to the left and then just take a look at the calculation, which is very similar to what we saw on page 1 of the application. We just take that number and then we divide it by 12, and that gives us our average cost for 1 month of these costs. And then we multiply it by 2.5 times, or basically 10 weeks, and we come up with that number. And I'm just going to make a footnote. I didn't discount any of the tabulations that we have here, but for any company that's working with federal programs, this alone is not going to cover you for the costs that are incurred for government programs, because we're already being reimbursed by the program. So in NCVC's case, we did have to actually come up with a calculation based on labor hours of how many people were working for the federal programs versus how many were working for non-federal programs. Anything that was federal was backed out. So we came up with a percentage, say it was 50%. Whatever this number is, you're going to have to, take that percentage off. In this case, I just left it that none of the programs were federal, so that you would, just to simplify the calculation. But if you have 75% of your programs are funded by the federal government, you'll only be able to get 25% of your average costs. So that is how we came to the number at the beginning of the application that said, please, we are asking for $445,134 of loan from the SBA, Small Business Administration. I think it might, next page, please. Okay, so on this page is the calculation that tells the bank we're hurting. And you get to pick whichever quarter it best suits you. But again, on the first page of that application, we identified that in 2020, the operating receipts for Company Z were $667,000, and we compared those to the third quarter of 2019, and it showed a 41% reduction in overall receipts. This was the only sheet of paper, and it was a similar sheet of paper for NCVC, not the same numbers, but that we provided our bank. Some banks are going to ask you to provide bank statements to support the number that you're giving them. It was sufficient with just this sheet of paper. It came out of our accounting software package, which is audited. So it's a solid number, but some banks might ask for more. Eagle Bank did not. And that's the overall process. Can we go to the next page? All right. So just to give you, I don't know like how familiar everybody is with the different documentation. I put on here a blank copy of a 941 just as an illustration. You don't need to know anything about 941s as long as you call up your payroll service provider and ask them for the quarterly 941s for the time period that you're applying for this loan. They'll provide it to you, regardless of whether you know anything about 941s or not. But I just put it on here just to say this visually, this is what you're going to get when you ask your payroll provider for 941s. Can we go to the next slide? So I guess the next several pages are going to be just a 941, you know, just so that you know what it looks like. There's nothing really else to be said there. Yep, same. Okay, and then the last thing I wanted to touch on is, as I mentioned in the beginning, if you haven't previously applied for, you know, PPP loan, you're not eligible for the second draw, but you are eligible to do the original first draw, and the application is slightly different. And this is a copy of that first draw PPP application. The same kind of timeline applies. You have until March 31st to get your application into your lender with the supporting documentation. If you need to get a blank form, you can go to the SBA website and just download this form. You can download the first form that we went over. But it's just important that if you've already applied and received money, you have to do the second draw, which is the application we went through. If you haven't received any money before, you'll use this application, which is slightly different, and it doesn't ask you for any kind of proof that you reduced your overall receipts year over year.
Hey, Richard, we do have a question
Sure.
that I'm going to read verbatim because some of it doesn't make sense to me, but it will to you.
Okay.
Which line are we checking on the 941 to show gross amounts for the quarter?
Which line? I don't know, maybe it won't make as much sense to me either. Again, like I said, if you get the 941s, literally, I think this is the most important answer to that question, because I don't have a specific answer for you. If you ask the payroll provider, I need my payroll information from January 1st, 2020 to December 31st, 2020, they will literally, I mean, I know ADP can do this, will spit out that spreadsheet that we showed a little bit earlier, exclusive of the healthcare benefits, and those numbers will tie to the numbers that are on your 941 that your bank is going to be looking at. So I don't know the exact answer to which line item they're going to be pulling off of, but if you talk to your payroll service provider, they'll give you that spreadsheet that you can download. They'll give you the 941s. Those numbers will tie to the spreadsheet that they produce for you. It's really as simple as that. The payroll service provider is really important in this process. I wish I could be more specific and give you an exact answer. I apologize for that, but you can rely on your payroll service provider to give you that information.
We are getting feedback that did answer the question.
Oh, it did or didn't?
It did.
Okay.
Good job.
Thank you. So
Oh, wait, we have another question. What does EIDL stand for?
We did not apply for that loan, and I don't know the answer, but it's a separate loan. It's a separate program.
And just a quick reminder to all participants, I happened to catch that one because it was in the chat and it was the last thing, but if you do have questions, please use the Q&A box. Sorry, Richard, go ahead.
That's okay. Yeah, so that is a separate loan program through the SBA. I'm not familiar with it at all. I know some of the clients at InSource have applied for that, but I don't have any knowledge on it. So that's really it in a nutshell. I think maybe, Megan, if you could scroll back up to the top, the first page of the loan application. Yep. And I'm going to do the same on my screen here. I can probably address any questions that relate to the first couple of pages of this loan application. What we did for both of the first and second draws is we filled this out in its entirety. We even had Renee sign it, even though she ended up having to sign it separately once everything got uploaded. But we literally uploaded this application with part of our documentation because it provided us with a level of confidence that we had every single piece of data that they needed. So I can speak fairly confidently on these 2 pages, which is what I think you guys are all going to need if you want to apply for the loan. If it gets too, complex, I won't be able to answer the questions. But does anybody have any questions about how Company Z went about calculating their information, or where you would need to go to get the information?
So there is a comment in the box that says there isn't a number on the 941 that will reconcile to the gross number of salaries that comes from your payroll reports. Do you
Okay.
want to talk about that or further explain?
I don't have the competency to address that. I do know that whatever it is that the bank is looking at, they were satisfied. I think there's some things that you have to, and again, I'm being very non-knowledgeable here, but there are things that are, reduced. You're like, when you get your gross salary, if you make $50,000 a year, some of that money is going to be not taxable. So I think the variation, the discrepancies are, what your gross salary is when you get hired, you earn $50,000 a year, and how much are you actually reporting to the federal government. If you put, into the 401k, your $50,000 is no longer $50,000 taxable. It comes down. And so there's a reconciliation process between your gross salaries and what's on the 941s. I wouldn't be able to speak to the details of that, though.
Thank you. Did anyone else have questions specific to, and I can try to answer some as well, as far as just what the employment process looked like going forward, and things like that, if there were pitfalls that we saw at NCBC. Were there any other questions? Give everyone a few minutes to finish typing if there are any. Okay. So this person's bank requested the 941s or the 943. So those are both form numbers that I'm not familiar with. So what is the difference, and does one basically summarize the other?
I'm not familiar with the 943. If they ask for that, it could be based on the type of organization you have. So I guess you would, again, if you go to your payroll provider and they are producing quarterly 943s for you, that should be sufficient. If they're producing 941s, then that would also be sufficient.
And then there's a question, and I think I understand this one, but would state funds fall under the same category as federal funds?
Yes.
Yes. So to answer that person's question more fully, when we're looking at all income. So no matter how you receive the funds, they all count as income.
Yep. Yep.
Are there any additional questions? Okay, we might end early today. So Richard, thank you so much for joining us, and everybody, thank you for joining us. If you do have questions, we are happy to try to find answers to them. Again, this was just our experience. These were our pitfalls and what we've been going through, but we were successful. So that should provide some good guidance. And again, if there are further questions that we can answer for you, please just send us an email. Oh, wait a minute. I am not quite clear on the form or the draw. We are a nonprofit and should file for the first draw. So to answer that person's question, the form that we were reviewing today was for the second draw. But in order to be eligible for that second draw, you do have to apply for the first draw.
If we go to the last page of this presentation, it'll show you the blank form for the first draw. So you would just use this application. Is that the very last? Can you slide up so we can see the actual, maybe it might be up a few pages just because like just go.
5 pages from the end, Megan.
Yes.
5 pages from the end.
So if you haven't yet applied for a PPP loan, you will fill out this form. It's the first draw. It's different than the one that we filled out. Very similar, but different. They actually revised this form in early January of this year. Virtually everything that we went over today is the same things that you're going to fill out here. You just do not have to show that you had any kind of reduction in your gross receipts. So they actually make it easier for you to get the first loan. The second loan, they don't want to keep giving money to people that are doing well or getting by. They want to be giving more money to people that are continuing to hurt during the COVID virus. But you do not have to prove to them that you lost money in one quarter in 2020 versus 2019. Other than that, it's virtually the same process we just explained.
Perfect. Thank you, Richard. To answer a couple of questions I'm seeing, we have recorded this session and we are going to make it available to all registrants, and we will have it closed captioned at that time. I would be remiss if I didn't remind you to join our Facebook page. We do have the Crime Victims Community in COVID-19, which is on Facebook. If you just search that, it'll pop right up again, Crime Victims Community in COVID-19, and then the general NCVC page, where we will be posting more information. And we do try to keep that pretty current as far as what's going on with trends we're seeing in COVID. And again, yes, we will be sending this presentation to you, to all registrants who emailed. So I think that is all. I haven't seen any other questions pop up. I want to thank everybody again for joining us today. And Richard, thank you for your expertise in this.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.